Hey guys, welcome to Priceless B-Movies. I'm going to ask a question, and it's going to sound a little weird since I'm attempting to ask you guys a question, but basically I'm just sitting in a room talking to a camera right now. But how many of you guys remember those books, the scary stories to tell in the dark? They were like horror anthology books, and they always had the real gruesome illustrations and the really spooky stories. I loved those when I was a kid. It's one of the things that made me love horror, not just horror movies, but just the horror genre. I love scary stories. I love hearing ghost stories and serial killer stories and stuff like that. But, when you're a kid and you hear something like that, it gives you nightmares or you think you see stuff and, your imagination runs away with you. But those monsters and those witches and killers, we all know that they're not really real. Right? Madman. So Madman stars Jenny Wright as this kind of cute, blonde, but kind of mousy character. This girl works in a used bookstore, and she's a big reader. She loves to read. She loves to read kind of this trashy horror, kind of pulp fiction kind of book. And at the beginning of the movie, she's reading this book called Much of Madness, More of Sin. And it's about this crazy doctor who breeds a half-man, half-jackal child, and the monster escapes, and and she loves this book, and she wants to read anything else that this author has done. She finds out this author has only written one other book, and that book is called I, Madman. And so she finds a copy of I, Madman. She starts to read it, but as she starts to read it, the book starts to play out, and the book happens to be about this crazy guy who cuts his face off and takes facial features from other people, stitches them on because he thinks if he does this, he'll be attractive enough to please this girl that he's trying to woo. As I said, though, the book starts to play out. She starts seeing this guy in various stages of stitching this stuff on his face. At one point, he's covered his whole face except for his eyes, because what you're not seeing is that under that mask he has no nose, no lips, and under the kind of whatever really weird hat he's wearing, he's got no hair. He's scalped himself. This is a weird idea, and only in a fiction book could a character like this exist, who has cut all this stuff off his face. He would have bled to death long ago, and we know this when we're watching the movie, but we accept it because we accept that he's a fictional character. Just like when we would read books like, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, we accept the weird stuff because it's fantasy, it's fiction. This makes the movie really creepy when that character shows up in real life and starts stalking this girl. Now, it's hard for me to explain too much more about this movie. There's a lot of tricks, and this is a very witty movie. This is a very smart movie. This isn't your average 80s slasher. I really, really like I, Madman. The film does have its faults, though. It does kind of fall prey to some of the cliches and tropes of the slasher genre. The biggest one this movie is guilty of is that the girl tries to go to the police, and then, of course, they don't believe her, and they think she's crazy, and, we've seen that kind of thing in almost every horror movie. The cops are never going to believe that a fictional character is going around cutting parts of people off, and, it's that, to me, it's almost kind of sad that this movie had to resort to that cliche. But it's the only cliche that I really have a problem with in this film. And really, the cinematography and how the story plays out really save this film. The whole film has a great kind of film noir feel to it. It almost feels like you're watching a 30s or 40s thriller, but, with a lot more blood. Also, as much as I like this movie, though, I do have to take a couple of points off of it for the really bad stop-motion effects in this. Randall William Cook plays the villain of the story, plays the crazy guy, the doctor, and he also created the stop-motion creatures and stuff for this movie. And while I think his makeup effects are great, the stop-motion effects aren't really, and it does, especially near the end, kind of distract. It distracted me, at least. I think that the stop-motion effects could have been done better. But, I think if you remind yourself that this movie came out in 1989 and didn't have a huge budget, I think some people will be more forgiving about it than I am. But I'm sorry, I just couldn't deal with it. Each time I watch the movie, I can't deal with how lousy I think the stop motion is near the end of that film. It's also worth mentioning on the plus side that this film has, at least in my opinion, one of the best shots in any horror film of the 80s, where the killer is chasing a girl into her apartment building, and she's at her door and she's fumbling with the keys, and she looks down this long hallway and you see the killer, and then the camera zooms real fast from where she is all the way to the killer's face. And I love this shot so much because it portrays the idea that, in slasher movies, if you're running from something, we've all seen these slasher movies where you're running from something, or the person on screen is running from a masked killer or something, and you just see them walking. And it's like, how do they catch up? And I think this shot in I, Madman really pulls the effect of, you think you're at a safe distance from this guy, but you're really not. He is really not that far from you. And I think that shot is done so well, and it's such a creepy idea. I would almost recommend this movie just for that scene. Gonna go ahead and throw 3.5 stars at I, Madman. This is almost a perfect horror movie. It's one of those gems from the late 80s that a lot of people don't know about, but I wish people would go see. I wish if you're sitting at home and you're on your computer and you're watching this, and you have Amazon Prime or some kind of site that allows you to watch I, Madman, I really recommend you give it a shot. The only things I really don't like about it is the one cliche that I think is just overdone to death in horror films, and I'm not big on the effects toward the end of the movie. Other than that, this movie is worthy of so much praise. I highly recommend I, Madman. That's my review of I, Madman. Stay tuned. I got a lot more reviews coming and a lot more requests coming. I'm also going to try to branch out a little bit. Some of the requests that have been sent to me aren't horror, and while I love reviewing horror movies, I am going to try to get some of these other requested films in. And as always, if there's a movie that's horror, crime, action, comedy, any other genre, but you think doesn't get a lot of attention, but maybe it should, you want to hear my opinion on it, let me know in the comments section. Get a hold of me and I'll see what I can do about checking that movie out and putting up a review for you. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more Priceless B movies.